Welcome back and thanks for staying with Newsnight. Now, many South Africans are hoping the state capture inquiry will punish those responsible for looting government coffers. But political analyst Susan Booysen has warned this commission could just fizzle out like many others that have come before it. She's penned an article about those currently governing the country and those who might do so in future. Professor Booysen joins us now in studio. Good evening, Prof. Thank you very much for your time. Now, on the basis of the testimonies that we've heard so far, are we able to discern any particular patterns?
I think we are certainly discerning multiple parties involved in this. And it's interesting, you know, even if much of what they hear in this commission evidence has been vaguely or specifically referred to in very good investigative reporting in South Africa before, it is how this picture builds together, the granularity, as they say, of how these deeds of capture, of disenabling otherwise powerful institutions in order to prepare the ground for personal spin-offs in the form of capture, how that all started cohering, how it was almost as if it's a systematic plan that was executed, and how systematically several parties, and particularly former President Jacob Zuma, how he is at the center of it, and how he is even very often quite a pathetic figure, acting at the behest of the Guptas, but obviously there was much to gain for him in there as well. So yes, that evidence systematically builds up in one place in a limited period of time, and the picture that is emerging is extremely disconcerting.
Well, let's try and make sense of that, Prof, in the limited time we also have here, you and I. Let's start with Phumla Williams and work our way backwards. How does Phumla Williams' testimony begin to put Jacob Zuma on the crime scene?
You know, that relationship, we know the link between the Guptas and Zuma, and we know, we have seen also from multiple pieces of evidence and then from hers, how that picture builds together, how the Guptas really acted on behalf of the president. They came in there with presidential authority, and people were deployed and redeployed and dismissed and demoted and retained in acting positions for the exact purpose of enabling the Guptas, setting the stage on which this Guptas could play out their capture game. And the way this hangs together here, that is so powerful.
How, for instance, does one explain the going with, if we go with Maseko's testimony, for example, that he was so keen when he couldn't play ball, he was so keen to get him removed, but as we heard today, almost like 5 years passed without GCIS having a head. It just doesn't make sense.
Yes, you know, so much still does not make that sense. And yet, you know, it's also a very damning picture that is emerging, is obviously how many people did know. And Phumla's evidence shows how clearly she felt so betrayed by other people around her who knew and who did not act along with her. And it showed, the evidence showed how limited a very powerful public servant like Phumla Williams could be in those circumstances where the president, the big boss, rules, and they can be dismissed, discharged, and at least she could hang on and play out the role of the good civil servant. I think today she evidence, the last 2 days, Friday and today, gave incredible power to the belief and show that there are still good public servants out there, that not the whole of the state and not the whole of the ANC in government and elsewhere is corrupted. So she still had that space to make that stand.
Well, I mean, later, of course, I mean, in a day or two's time, we're going to hear from representatives of the implicated parties who are obviously going to want to, like, punch holes in the testimonies that we have heard. So, your take, what do you think is going to come out of there?
You know, it is going to be a huge trial for the people who have been giving solid evidence and relating their experiences, because lawyers, and these are high-level, highly paid legal representatives, they will be there to poke holes, and the people on whom's behalf they will be doing that, they will not be there at all, except maybe via Skype link here or there. But most of those people are not going to be there at all. So it's a very highly uneven and in many respects, I think, quite an unfair situation. Those people are probably, the lawyers will be, advocates will be doing their best to tear every bit of evidence to tiny little shreds. And these people could pay a huge price for being there. And there are so many people. We see this network of names who have not yet been mentioned otherwise except here and there in evidence. And the questions of when will those people be brave enough to go and stand and give that evidence as well. And to make this whole network understandable, to fill in those gaps. But it is a long haul, and you know, it is going to be a long process, whereas the demand is very much for prosecution. So much evidence of what we've heard before is being corroborated in this high level, credible level of evidence leading right now. But it's going to be a long time until this commission can get converted into recommendations to prosecute, and that is where many people are saying the NPA, National Prosecuting Authority, should commence that process of prosecuting where there is sufficient evidence and should not just wait for the outcome of this commission, because it could be quite a few years down the line.
Now I want you to try and answer a question you're posing in the piece that you wrote. Will this commission, certainly from what we've heard, I mean, so far, do you believe that it will be able to distinguish itself from, say, the Seriti Commission or even the Falam Commission?
Yes. You know, this is the curse of high-level, otherwise very good commissions, that the evidence has to be converted into credible findings. And in the case of the Zondo Commission, those still have to go one step further. They can only recommend towards investigations to prosecute. So it's a long, long process. And unless great care is taken to keep it together and to make sure that there are definitive outcomes, inescapable outcomes, it could very well go on to the never, never process like other commissions had.
But in your view, where did the others collapse? At what point?
You know, they collapsed in a certain sense of the word when mostly strong findings, and this is different. Falam had stronger findings, but there were so many conditionalities and so many ifs and buts where it was very difficult to convert those into specific prosecutions, for example. We're only seeing now, so many years ago, quite a number of years after, there are tentative prosecutions here and there in terms of police forces and so on, but it's not it doesn't bring satisfactory answers. Seriti Commission collapsed at a much earlier phase, you know, when Judge Seriti there disallowed some pieces of evidence. Containers full of evidence was never investigated. It was only first-hand evidence that was allowed, and that is not how that type of evidence works in that case. Very interesting in the Zondo case. We've seen over the weekend that high-level security staff in South Africa who have been part of earlier statements, they are coming out and saying how a decade ago it has been warned that this level of capture is not just inappropriate and corrupt, but also strategically dangerous for South Africa. So maybe this time around there is much more push in order and demand insistence on it taking a particular direction. And the judge himself, he is so important in this whole process.
Prof, we're going to leave it there for this evening. Thank you very much for your time.